champion that study. And I hope, and since I'm a clergy, pray that one day the action plan will actually be made public, which it hasn't been yet. So there's an estimate that there's 150 million square feet of undeveloped property, religious property, available for development in New York City. Jay Lerner, an expert in religious property development, has come up with that. That could mean about 150,000 units of affordable housing that we can come up with as many communities. Building community safe and secure affordable housing, and not simply selling their properties for market rate projects and developers. But there are constraints to this happening. The financial sacrifice created by building affordable units, the bureaucratic challenges that slow down any project. Believe me, you have to have the patience of Job when you get into this business. Pre-development funding that's not available. Legal advice that isn't available. Don't sign anything until you have some good lawyers working for you. And also, FBO's desire to provide home ownership at low cost and to employ novel models of development that don't fit within the bureaucracy. So the plan of action presented to our mayor and this panel today will share some of the concepts and incentives in partnering with the city, especially with housing preservation and development. And also, as we well know, we need to also talk a little bit about the Attorney General's office to overcome some of the obstacles. So all of our panelists have great track records in building affordable housing and working to end homelessness, and I'd like to introduce them. So Nehemiah Rising is a 40-year-old faith-based community housing organization that has a variety of partnerships to provide empowerment opportunity for residents of New York City. They have built approximately 4,000 homes at low cost for first-time home buyers, generating about $2.5 billion in generational wealth. And they look to prioritize developments that build community and also generational wealth. And Arshad Bacchus serves as the director of real estate at Nehemiah HDFC. Victoria Baraka brings more than 20 years of experience in the affordable housing and real estate finance to Enterprise Community Partners, New York's Office of Faith-Based Development Initiative, which provides local faith leaders with technical assistance, training, grants, feasibility studies, and access to experts. Enterprise is a national nonprofit which has invested $54 billion and created 873 homes nationwide. Okay. Beatrice De La Torre, known as Bea, is the managing director for homelessness and housing here at Trinity Wall Street, and we're the philanthropies division. And she's responsible for programs and grants that can break the cycle of homelessness in New York City. She's also responsible for investing in initiatives to increase the supply of low-income affordable housing. And I think we all agree we're grateful for Trinity hosting this event today. Doing this in alphabetical order. Brenda McBride, following 2 decades in the private and nonprofit affordable housing sector, Brenda McBride has served since 2018 as Associate Commissioner for New Construction at HPD, where he oversees the divisions that provide funding for the construction of new affordable housing for New Yorkers, including supported housing and initiatives to permanently house formerly homeless individuals and families. And finally, Dr. Malcolm A. Hunter is the president and CEO of Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement, Inc. Dr. Hunter drives the affordable housing initiatives of HCCI, which currently has several new construction projects in production, and HCCI has $550 million in real estate assets under management. We know that many of you want to do more development of affordable housing, but the financial sacrifice can be great. So what are some of the solutions to these problems? So I'll call on Victoria to begin.
Yeah, just to give a little context on Enterprise, we worked with faith leaders for decades here in our state and nationally. So we come from this from a place of experience and listening to you, talking about the trends, challenges, and opportunities. So I'd say one of the many boundary areas is the boundaries. So the site control, the long-term ownership, we understand is important to faith-based organizations, to the community, to create and maintain wealth of the affordable housing and development in the community. So that avenue of considering ground leases as a means of site control is something that we see in the real estate market. It's a bit of a nuanced space. So certainly talk to us, talk to attorneys about what this means and what it looks like. This is an area where the city can do more. It can provide more opportunities for ground leases, provide more guidance around what it would take to be considered for ground leases. And that's something that, again, with a 99-year ground lease, with a really long-term ground lease, you're not forgoing affordable housing, you can build affordable housing, and you can retain the ownership. So that's something we're really focused on, is working with communities to ensure that A, they're empowered to develop a vision for their site, and B, that they don't lose that control and that power once the site is built. I have many more ideas.
What do we teach people after this panel? Malcolm, you have some ideas that you wanted to share with us that come out of our agenda.
Well, thank you all for being here. Give us up around the floor. All the recommendations are included actually created by House of Worship community in the early 1980s. And HCI was a beneficiary of the HBD's programs, the Housing Preservation and Development of the time. In the early 1980s and early 1990s, it was an orientation to be the HBD is a teaching organization. They were working with new business owners and the Enabling Entrepreneurs Program, and they had a corresponding program on the front, and HCI was a beneficiary of that. So, I'd like to see this orientation return, because when we got away from this type of philosophy and Enterprise actually one of the first funders of HCI and continues to be an investor in affordable housing. But there was always an organization to help shepherd through the process of development, which is very complex, organizations and community-based businesses to get them through the various points of development. Where I think we've gone wrong in the present day is that everything's now focused on institutional investors, people who left Wall Street and crashed in 2008 and now reinvented themselves in real estate development. They weren't interested in real estate. They were down here making money equities, and now reinvented themselves in real estate development. And unfortunately, some of them have become predators to House of Worship and community-based organization, and that's unfortunate. One of the other things I have innovated at HCCI is that we're no longer going to allow you as mission work folks and seminarians to be on your own. We're now going inside of the institutional learning for seminaries like theological seminary and teaching you from the get-go that you're going to be responsible for real estate assets as a pastor or as a reverend. So you should get training in finance and in real estate development, so that when that guy comes with you or that woman comes with you with the bag of money, you should say no. You're not going to accept that. That we're going to refer you to our attorney, and if you keep pressing that, we're going to refer you to the attorney general. These are the things such a transaction. I'll stop there and we'll talk about it a little bit.
Leah, do you want to address this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'm so thrilled to be with all of you here. The city has been facing affordable housing crisis for far too long. 60,000 people are sitting in the shelter and 20,000 kids. So obviously the need for affordable housing is severe, right? And that's what I dedicated my career to, and I'm so thrilled to be working with all of you for that goal. So as much as we need focus on housing, and that's really what we need, sometimes what we need is flexibility in projects. Projects need to happen, you understand what's going on. That might include also mixing within a project, right? And I just wanna say a project, and there is no bigger proponent for the different housing than me, but I'd rather see some more units, if that means there needs to be a new market making this, it's not something I can go with. But I'd rather have see that and have a fire in the house. So I think flexibility again is really key. You know, talk about the ground leases and filling those gaps and responsibilities and ensuring that you all in your congregation stay in control. I think that's going to be the theme of the whole session today, so that you don't feel like we need to be forced into a partnership where for-profit developers putting equity, forcing you to end up in a place where you don't want to be in control of your.
Thank you. Good morning. Really honored to be speaking to so EMI represents or works with the East Berkeley congregation. 40 or so faith-based organizations. We're also with South Bronx churches and faith-based there and having together these power. So we really pride ourselves on working with faith-based organizations. And I really wanted to present and speak to you all today with three main goals that I wrote here. One is to protect you as a faith-based organization, but also to unlock your assets and also to respond to your community needs. Over the last year or so, our team at PMI has worked with several churches to do feasibility studies on their faith plan. So we're very much so practitioners, and I want to use these examples and sort of communicate with you here today, which is the constraints that we face in some recommendations. So we have a very high value land in Westside. The current zoning allows for about 20 units per building. Now with 20 units, it's essentially a financially increased project based on the current term sheets that are term sheets with HPD and other government agencies. So to overcome this constraint, there are essentially two proposals on the table. The first is we can allow for zoning bonuses for faith-based organizations that are similar to the MIH zoning bonuses or fresh zoning bonus, ear zoning bonus. There's so many bonuses out there, and we should create one that is specific to faith-based organizations and their site. Now that may be more long-term and would require the incorporation of several different parts or arms of government. But what is more immediate and can be accomplished literally as we walk out the door today is that HPD can expand their NCP program or create a pseudo NCP program. A 20-unit project doesn't qualify for 4% housing tax credits. It's also very difficult to make it competitive for 9% tax credits. So is there a program out there, is there a subsidy funding stream where we can finance smaller projects without the need of for housing tax credits? So essentially two proposals there from the working group. One is a zoning bonus for faith-based land, and two is, can we see a program that is geared towards smaller developments? Thank you.
Brendan, your HPD.
I have a lot of answers.
You have a lot of answers. You've read the report.
But I need to go ahead and speak here. I thought this was the closure office on learning national. My topic in my eyes and in my voice. So just from a personal standpoint to start, we all have a foundation do an integrated development project. Really, experience showing how base organizations have feet on the ground, know the needs of communities, first, and really are instrumental. So that's something that I carry throughout my career. So, you know, as part of some of the ideas that I raised, you know, I know the acquisition policy is really a focus of the action plan. And, you know, I think we recognize the need for flexibility and reexamination, especially something that market clearly is always changing, never constant. We of course are always balancing any examination of our policy and changes in our policy with how it measures up to the long term of local house buildings, particularly tenants. That's our collective interest here. We want to make sure that we're creating buildings that not for years, not for decades, but even longer remain a secure resource for neighborhoods. Make sure that our instruments are all here. So, you know, ground leases, we have permitted ground leases for, again, that measuring against the long-term interests of the tenants and the buildings. Sure. I think we just, you know, need to understand the argument for them and the case made that, you know, sort of balance those interests. We have done recent ground leases in the last couple of years with big institutions, so it's certainly something that we want to talk about. You know, and development, as you well know, each of these deals is its own sort of special case. No deal like others is really easy. You know, to your point, Rashad, on small scale development, I think, you know, I often say that it's sometimes more complicated to involve a 40-unit project than a 100-unit project. You know, some of the complexities of small scale development, especially the scattered site development, you know, make it more challenging for a larger project. That's exacerbated by the lack of explicit funding programs that can be done at a small scale. We have done small projects over the next 6 months, but it is challenging from a tax credit point of view to the projects. And it is something we're taking into account. So one thing we have done recently is getting we'll get to that. But we have as part of look at how we can accelerate the land and tax credit. Tax credits are the main federal supply of them. So what we've done is we've identified projects, usually smaller projects, where we can remove those federal resources and build them in inside the city. Other projects are also, you know, I'll talk a little bit more about other programs, but you know, to leave it that, you know, we're always interested in making them what we do, and I think it's actually what we do.
Malcolm, you wanted to talk a little bit about asset right tax exemptions for affordable housing and also a larger set aside for tax exempt bonds.
Sure. Thank you, Bill. I have the pleasure of serving on the urban group as one of the food shares. We met with the mayor in City Hall. It was June 7th. And he was very attentive to listen to us. And we were asked, I think at very point, what are some of the suggestions that they development or big-based properties as well as the non-profits. And there were 3 recommendations that came out of that discussion. But there was a host of others that's in the work document. But one of the topics note that we discussed was the fact that the Internal Revenue Code, which actually happens to be the same legislation of 1986, tax code, tax reform act of 1986, is the same legislation that has codified low tax credit program in section 42 that has fueled the needs of affordable housing units throughout the country. And every state in the union is eligible to utilize what we call it for short ITEC financing or tax credits to promote affordable housing. However, there was a similar item in the tax code that existing for that same period of time that we haven't utilized in New York City enough, and that is the 501c3 tax exempt bonds, which allows a non-profit 501c3 to issue charitable bonds to fund affordable housing or other infrastructure projects. So we made the recommendation that we should explore as a city, HPD, who is not really the bond allocating agency for the city, rather it's HDC, but that they would give the authorities additional bonds so that 501c3s, non-profit faith-based organizations could leverage their property and to build affordable housing. And what's unique about this tax code provision, the charitable exempt bonds, tax exempt bonds, is that you could leverage your property up to 100%, which really could, in theory, eliminate the need for equity partners in for-profit entities like Wall Street bankers, if you will. So that was one recommendation. Then the second recommendation was, let's find a way to make Article 11 more useful and not, some pet project of a city council person to wield whether they want to give it back. I think that is a dubious sort of policy. So we want Article 11 to be as the right for affordable housing projects, those projects that are sponsored by faith-based organizations, houses of worship. We think that's more practical because you know that they created a certificate of corporation. They've been bound by a mission-driven set of services to the community. The tax code itself has allowed them to operate as a tax exempt entity for the purpose of filling the gap and providing services to people in the community that the government can't provide. The foundation of that relationship is the trade-off. The government can't do it, right? It's not efficient enough. So let's have nonprofits and these organizations provide services to people. So why not promote, it as a right Article 11, which is a tax exemption, real estate tax exemption that will reduce the cost of development and operations ongoing, and it could fill the gap in some of the financing difficulties that we spoke about. And then raising the bond cap is another suggestion that our group made because it's just not enough to go around. The standard bonds that are issued by agency, we want to make sure that there's
Thank you. I think we're going to get into the weeds a little bit, and one of the first things that you need to think about and to do is to get an independent appraisal. And Victoria's going to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And I just wanted to snap a little bit to some of the points that Sean was making around small buildings. There needs to be multiple housing models here in the city. There's so much land, so much opportunity to build affordable housing with smaller building programs, which we've done it before and continue to do. And the zoning for scale, the possibilities, other markets around the country that are doing these things there. But getting back to appraisals, in the cautionary tales we've heard about today, it is so important to get your own appraisal. Do not trust others. Do not let the developer come to you with their appraisal. Get your own appraisal. Know what your property is worth. Work with an appraiser who understands this business. Not all appraisers, they might be certified and not all the same. Some specialize in single family homes, some specialize in land, but there are appraisers that work with the city, with financial institutions, with big organizations. Make sure you get an appraisal and get it done by somebody who has experience in this space. Knowing what your land is worth is foundational to everything, because this is your legacy. This is what we hear a lot from community leaders is that they don't necessarily have a lot of cash in the bank, but they have land, and this is real estate in New York City, that land is worth a tremendous amount of money. And what might sound like a lot of money from a developer might not even be the real value of the land. So knowing what it is on a neighborhood level, knowing how you can then use that negotiating power, that equity that you're bringing to the deal as a source of power and bringing the vision to the community that you want, that starts with the appraisals, that starts with knowing the value, and that starts with not leaving any of that value on the table. So I think we understand there's different neighborhoods in the city. Some of them are what we call higher cost neighborhoods, where land that may be worth more than other neighborhoods. That could be harder to do for an affordable housing deal with the housing term sheets with the city and the state. But it doesn't mean it can't be done, whether it's like Jay was talking about, maybe doing some mixed income and using some of those market rate units to make the affordable units more viable, or whether it's doing things like the purchase money mortgage, you're recognizing the full value of your property, but maybe you're willing to have a bit of a seller's note on the deal in this capital stack that you're paying an interest rate, it's paid over time through cash flow, to make the deal happen, to make the rents affordable for those in the neighborhood, or to work within the city's term sheets. But again, all of these factors start with the appraisal. That's the baseline for everything. That's an example of the type of resources that enterprise can provide at no cost to faith-based organizations to help you think about what's possible and where you can get started.
Not just land value, but highest and best use that takes into account the development rights that your property may have. We know one church in particular that sold its air rights for $44 million. That pastor then got letters from churches in Iowa saying they'd like to sell their air too. That was cute. You have to say it's a joke, that doesn't work. So let's move into the bureaucratic challenges with HPD and then also with the Attorney General's office. So who'd like to take a crack at that? Marsha?
I'd love to. So this is sort of building off of Victoria's point on appraisals. One of the big requirements of receiving AG approval is getting an appraisal done. Good luck with getting an appraisal past the AG's office the first time. So this sort of goes to speak about the bureaucratic challenges that many of us face in development, which is not clear guidelines. And that is present for the AG's office and is present with a lot of other agencies out there. Now, the AG approval process is very important, and we need it to protect our faith-based organizations and make sure that they're getting fair and just compensation for their land. But the AG can go further in that they can streamline the process. They can create an online fillable form or PDF or application for approval. And then also they can just publish guidelines and publish a list of folks that are pre-qualified, if you may, that we can go to and we can solicit appraisals from. And then sort of building on this point of bureaucratic challenges. So the same site that we have at Bedside, which is again in a high value neighborhood, requires Attorney General approval. It's also in a landmark preservation district, and so we need landmarks approval. We're going to need DEP approval for water and for environmental. We're going to need DOB approval for permits. We're going to need DOF approval for lot apportionment and merger. We're going to need HPD's approval for financing. And my list of city agencies that we have to talk to just goes on and on and on. So imagine having to speak to all of these different agencies and sort of just in a very coherent way go through the development process. It would be very helpful if we have a single point of contact. Typically, HPD fills that role. Maybe that role can start earlier. That can help the developers, can help the faith-based organization sort of traverse these various different agencies to get a project off the ground.
David, you wanted to talk about this
I
also?
will follow up on that, so, sorry, but just from the hot seat, I used to work at HPD answer for almost 10 years, doing very similar work, taking time for Euler, and like I said, needed deep description, changes. And, you know, it's very complicated and incredibly bureaucratic, and the administration has some very great improvements in the process, but the reality is there's still many pain points there. And I should say, the business solutions, development is not your main business, right? You have a million other things that you're doing that are incredibly important. So I think having, not just the help externally with groups like Enterprise and others, but also within HPD and some of these groups, so really having a dedicated person that will help these projects move through the pipeline, not just even the coordination within the agency, which already within HPD is very complicated, but with the other agencies that you were referencing, that includes obviously city planning, Department of Linux and others.
You want to respond?
Sure.
Now we know why you wore a mask. I was,
Providing a copy. Yeah, I think a lot of your points are great. Some of the resources that you bring together the team early on, or at least you're getting the right expertise to be able to assess options early on, especially for you strike a deal. That early stage, there's so many unknowns, even with the appraisal, there's so many unknowns as deal structure. Then unless this is your daily life, your bread and butter, you do development, you really need something development to drive that process. You're getting the right outcome for. So, as far as bureaucracy, we're obviously all for more coordination. And one way we've done that is through having from our pipeline works. You're not in a position as a organization having two councils. So I think that is critical. My colleagues in the office of the strategies, which is the new version of where you work, have set up a dedicated staff person focus on these skills. And we'll very much be playing that role, shepherding projects on process. Person really kind of being the town to be helping development teams understand sort of where the where to go for this or that. Try to work with. We've just published resources that I think are advertised in the packet on our website, consolidated all the resources we have with the database development. I think I yesterday, so definitely check that out. There's a number of documents on there that help both the and then we can see broad strokes on
Commissioner Carrion mentioned that before this morning. So one of the other difficulties is pre-development funding, and how can that be obtained and increased? Would like to take a stab at this one. Okay, all right.
I really want to give a shout out to the Mission Real Estate team within Trinity Church, led by Reverend James Black, for identifying this huge issue and pre-development funding. So, there's various ways of doing this, right? One is philanthropy, right? And yes, they're setting up they set up a program, we also do some funding within the homelessness portfolio. But the reality is we need a more sustainable approach. That's not just counting philanthropy. So grants are great, but also we should be thinking about institutions that provide 0% interest loans, right? We do know that a lot of the pre-development funding, if you end up closing the deal with HPD, it gets, reimbursed to some extent, right? So it's a matter of patching and bridging that funding. So that is one of the recommendations within the action plan is there's some models, one in Massachusetts that's specifically referenced of the CDFI that provides exactly this type of capital, which is very much good.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, enterprise is providing pre-development support, thanks to Trinity and other philanthropists. It takes a village to put these kinds of resources together to be able to deliver it to the faith community. We also worked with the State Office of the Attorney General to design a program that provides some support and test it out statewide over the last few years. The access to kind of no cost, what we call feasibility studies, appraisals, zoning analyses, environmental reports, final reports, things of that nature to know what you're working with, that you don't have any surprises down the line is really important as you think about what you want to do and then making what we call go, no go decisions in terms of that development process. I will put HPD on the hot seat yet again. I would say one last point for the city to continue to do, they do this and can do it in even greater extent is providing soft commitments. So what will accelerate affordable housing, what will bring more certainty and help with the pipeline for faith leaders is to look at those proposals and to provide soft commitments to those organizations that will unlock pre-development loans. So they may not be 0% loans, but they will be that early stage critical capital to move from the project vision through the architect and design stage, the building approval stage to a construction closing. And there is a large amount of pre-development funding in the community through what we call CDFIs, community development finance institutions. Enterprise is one, this is another, Leviticus is another. There's many out there. You know, there's a great need out there. So again, it takes a village to put these kinds of resources together. The New York City Acquisition Fund is another resource that has served many faith-based joint venture partnerships, including the ones that the mayor mentioned this morning, Ebenezer and Tennessee, Washington. So that is a fund that is done very much in partnership with the city and provides that early stage financing for deals to get through the pre-development process and into the city's pipeline for our construction closing.
There's also a program called the Interfaith Housing Collaborative. Peter Cook, I think, is here. He's one of the people providing technical assistance. It's funded by Trinity and their philanthropy division, which would provide pre-development loans to faith-based organizations. I heard you begin.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add to Victoria's point. It's about providing the soft commitment letters, but it's also about providing it in an expeditious manner. So if we present a project to HPD or to another agency that provides these letters, we'd like to see those letters come within weeks or a couple of months and not take 8 months, 9 months, or a year. And then also the soft commitment letter unlocks a lot of different pre-development financing, acquisition financing. Maybe we can expand on the terms of those acquisition loans. So as other speakers alluded to, lower interest rates, but also maybe a higher loan to value ratio. And so faith-based organizations can use it to help fund building up capacity within their organizations rather than there being a need to sell essentially ownership to developers for that capacity.
Response?
Yeah.
It's something.
Addition out of that, software is the, for those of you who are not familiar with this construct, it's idea is that, we haven't seen a before. For us, but there's a good reason to provide the software that enables us to move forward and seek other tools like acquisition, financing, effectively that's sort of the moment when the deal enters our pipeline. So it really is critical for us to really understand the deal, evaluate it fully, and know that it's something that's now years down the line when the project closes, we're going to really put many so it is critical that we have the space to do that. For the collective interest. We were definitely way to do it better and provide guidelines and give clarity. One thing that I wanted to sort of take a step back and note, I think it's really important to understand, is that, it takes many years. Remember, we said, it's a long game. Down, it's a long game. We all know that. We're all New Yorkers. Real estate is, practically a hobby for everyone. I think the problem is more acute when it comes to the world. It's that more complicated. The total project finance is complicated. They come with all the same challenges, entitlements, zoning approvals, design, construction, project. You have all of those things, and I think we all can do better in trying to streamline this process where possible. It's a focus of that administration. Re-examine the policies that are the pain points and see if there are areas where we can do it faster. That said, a big part of the delay or the time it takes to get the government despite the fact that New York City that's more in full concentration than anywhere in the nation. We still do not have all the resources that we need in any given year to close everything in our pipeline. And much of the resources we rely on are federal resources. So, that is one of the biggest constraints. Even if a project has gone through all of the stages of approval that is ready to put a shovel in the ground, we don't always have the resources at that moment to be able to fund it, close the construction financing, and stuff. So, I would urge everyone to keep an eye on initiatives and advocate to your elected officials at the federal level, particularly, to put more resources in the way of tax credit programs, 4 and 9% programs, urban versions of bills that have expanded both 9% tax credit and certain tests for the 4% credit that would give us so much more resources to work with and would enable us to move on.
I'm getting a signal that we need to end this panel. Remember, here's the postcard with the email info@bricksandmortals.org to send specific questions to all of our panelists. Our plan of action had 4 constraints and about 25 different ideas on how to eliminate those barriers. We covered maybe 10 of them this morning. So I hope that this plan of action will soon be made public and that we can begin the process of working with all of the different agencies for better coordination so that it's an easier process for all of you to do faith-based mission-driven development. Thank you all for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to start now some mic cards for questions. Jason will be just going to take a few questions in this round. We have David Lewis from the question office. He's going to have these questions. I'm going to take a few. Just a few. We'll have us complete for tonight. Because the night, I want to go online with you have to try something that would be okay. All right. All right, so we have Jason Michael. I we have individuals from the who are here. We have goes on to, once we make the mention of, next round that we have after shelter. After shelter is, where we ask you, faith community, after shelter that's closest to the referrers, the one who need that trauma. So if you like your after shelter, that's all we need to do here. Please come from office so we can give you that information. All right, so our next conference is in May. Don't forget, you guys are doing really good. Doing well, and we have no breaks, go straight through, the reference is all the way around. We have 2 great times before us, we have not talked that advanced data.
All right, so everybody, please go get food, so this is quietly, because, as I said, this is a boot camp. We're gonna eat as we move, we've got meals ready to eat, we're gonna eat as you learn. So how's everybody doing? Can anybody hear me? Yeah, so far, right, we've been sitting a long time. Okay, so this panel is about landmarks. Who knows what landmarks in New York City are? Raise your hand. Not a whole lot. How many people here own or are in an organization that owns a landmark property? All right, please. Okay, how many of you have questions and concerns about your landmark property? All right. So this panel again is about landmarks. I know that you've been sitting for a while. And we've got sort of our own panel, or the panel is, has expert experience and knowledge. But does anyone have a particular landmark issue that they would like to be addressed by this panel? Yeah, we want to, please.
Want me to write it?
Up to you. If you want to write it down, and I can make sure that we do it along the way, or you can.
It is generally the question of working within a landmark district and the restrictions that that places on the envelope for development.
Perfect. We're gonna get to that in the panel. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. We'll make sure that we get to it. Any other issues we want to make sure that we get to? Yes, ma'am.
What about opposition from the residents in the area?
Excellent. I think maybe Mark, you could include that in some of your answers. Is that okay? We're gonna include it in our panel. Any others? Fantastic. All right, I'm gonna give you our quick setup because not everybody really knew what landmark was. So I'll give you a little background and then we're gonna go right into our panel. As you can see, I tend to talk fast, I tend to talk a lot. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Let me know if you're not understanding what I'm putting down. And I'll try to do it again. Okay, the Landmarks Preservation Commission was created in 1965 in response to the loss of historically significant buildings in New York City. Most importantly, or most notably, Penn Station. Penn Station did not always look quite the way it does now. Although for some of you, you may have a small place in your heart. According to landmarks law, this is critical. The purpose of landmark designation is to 1, stabilize and improve property values. 2, foster civic pride. 3, protect and enhance city attractions and tourists. 4, strengthen the economy of the city. And 5, promote the use of historic districts, landmarks, interior landmarks, and scenic landmarks for education, pleasure, and welfare of the people of the city. LPC is comprised of 11 commissioners and 80 staff, who are preservationists, researchers, architects, historians, attorneys, archaeologists, and administrators. Presently, this is critical. We're talking about the number and size of real property here. We already talked about 150 million square feet. There are 37,847 landmark properties in New York City. Most are in 154 historic districts. Begin to address your questions. So the question here before us is, how does landmark affect our faith institutions and their work? Is it a public benefit? Is it a negative? Does it depend, or is it complicated? How can it be improved? That's what we're here to begin to discuss. Our goal of this conversation is to elucidate the process. We've broken it up into 4 sections. Landmark, hopefully we'll get through all of those. We're going to keep on a tight timeline. We have a boot camp and this train is moving. Landmark designation and de-designation. Well, there's not a lot on the ladder, and Mark will explain that to you. Support, maintenance and support after you've been designated.
Changes and demolition to your property after you've been designated. Designated will include individual landmarks, being in a historic district, and then ultimately closing thoughts and next steps. Again, I believe that cards are being passed around if you have particular questions on this or others. Also, you have cards on the Emergency Rules email to send any questions on this or other items that are discussed today and how to get engaged in next steps. Okay, so I didn't introduce myself. I am Jason Levy. I'm a partner at law firm Goldstein Hall. We do a lot with faith-based real property. I'm also the chair of Bristol Board. With me today is Reverend Angela Redmond. She's the executive director and CEO of the United Methodist City Society. Edward Stoke, down on the end, is the director of diocesan property for the Episcopal Diocese of New York, and formerly worked at the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Rachel Hildenbrand, did I do that right? Ah, say it again. Hildenbrand, thank you, I tried. Director of National Fund for Sacred Places and partners, as a partner for Sacred Places. Father Patrick Williams, who is in the center, who is our priest in charge at St. Martin St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Harlem, both of which have landmark issues. And Mark Silverman, who may be our general counsel of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And you aren't hiding your face, so people know who you are. So let's jump right into it. Mark, will you please, to address some of the questions here, particularly on designation, explain or give our audience some idea of how owners and concerned citizens can influence landmarking, either prior to designation, either requesting designation or to look at.
Thank you very much. Let me just say from the outset, very happy to be here. I've been a family member 25 years, so I have a lot of experience dealing with faith-based organizations over the years. And let me just say from the outset that we recognize the importance of faith-based organizations and their abilities to community. Recognize that they're often considered landmarks way before 1965 when the law was created, and certainly well before they being designated by us. And we recognize that they are special. Really can look back and work closely with faith-based organizations. Find ways to move forward. Designation process just quickly about time. The commission has adopted a landmarks law set forth criteria for landmarks and primarily things that do with the significance, architectural, historical, places, city, state, that's the statutory.
We really can't hear you in the back. It's kind of noise. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
We need you to speak up.
You're good. I'm not a pastor. I'm trying to speak well. So, the designation, so there's these statutory criteria. There's also priorities that are set by. So, in looking to designate something, the commission has a research department that does surveys that they've been around for a long time, and there's a lot of survey work. In addition, we accept requests from the requests for evaluation, which are not applications for landmarks, but requests by members of the public or owners that property or areas to be considered. All those things are considered in light of those statutory criteria, but also in terms of these priorities, which they have to do with currently there is an equity-based priority system where our areas of the city that are less designated, less landmarks, there are our designations reflecting the full diversity of the population of New York. Those are the kind of things that affect. So in terms of if you and I should say that in the process of designation, I think it's important for how it works, is there's a public hearing. We are required to reach out to all owners of landmark properties prior to that hearing. But we do a lot more outreach.
if something is designated, it's effective upon our vote, but there's a process where the city council can review and rescind or modify designation. So there is a process by which communities and faith-based organizations can, who are unhappy with designation, can reach out and try to that's the outcome. So if you're in favor, if you want your property designated, first step is to submit a request for evaluation, that on our website, and using those criteria of significance, try to make your case why it's significant. And, for those who have issues with designation, it's really important to take advantage of the outreach that's happening. Because all landmarking ultimately have to go to city council, there's always a lot of outreach. You can also recognize we have a long-term relationship. If something's designated, we are going to be working with that property owner for a long, long time. We want to understand what the issues are. We obviously want your support if we're thinking seriously about designating something. But we also want to hear what the challenges are, what your issues are. So there are lots of opportunities for meetings, and I would encourage everyone to reach out to manage those. And these are meetings with the chair, these are meetings with the executive director, and senior staff. So these are high-level meetings that you can have to express what your issues are. And sometimes, for example, we can modify a proposed landmark site to exclude a big portion of that site that you are thinking about the development on. That's feasible. So we need to understand what the issues are, and we can try to work with those issues and within the law to address them. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mark. I want to confirm, summarize, and clarify. So, I believe that the commission, right, while they hear the public and the owner, they are focused on the historical, architectural, merits of the site, in making a determination. The council person, as we said, can take any and all, manner of considerations as to whether or not they support the plans. There is some case law that council can or not consider, but yeah. Thank you, and to address the gentleman's question, yeah, more on the support side, but very quickly, are the considerations different for historic districts or buildings within a historic district than they are for single? I'm not trying to understand the question for designation. Yes, yes, the standards are different.
No,
It's development.
sorry, not for designation, it's for
Where is
working,
this for support?
working effectively within a footprint or an envelope
Okay, we'll
that
get
is
to that
covered
later.
by those pictures of, in that sense.
We'll get to that.
With regard to the previous panel, that was about working through new barriers. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, so, we also are very fortunate to have Egbert with us. Egbert formerly worked at the Landmarks Preservation Commission. It is now working for the Episcopal Diocese of New York and in the property. Egbert, can you tell us a little bit about your experience, having worked at local institutions?
Yeah, so I worked for a very so yeah, I worked for 5 years at the Land Conservation Commission, which is now almost 3.5 years. So I have seen both and yeah. And I would like to start with LPC's methodologies. So they are working with the framework of law and certain things. And I think they're both trying to celebrate their significant architectural successful. The majority of our churches at least are landmarks, and I think it's almost 75%. So I think LBC strengthens the church's identity through their buildings and documenting it, trying to educate the public through their media, and I think landmark also allows churches to have publicity, to have also be eligible for grants and loans. But I want to make the distinction that the churches that I talked about, there's down in Manhattan, so I was working with Bronx, Washington Heights, and I also want to say that LPC guarantees almost guarantees the saving of renovation, but it doesn't say parish. Parish, we lose all the buildings. So for churches, they must get help them refinance. Here, for 100 years. So I think it's important to know that parishes are thinking of landmark. What is my long-term plan? Do I have my finances first? What's the state of the building? Do I want to do development? How do I create a stable economic model? Because the Landmark Preservation Commission has great staff. That's the biggest plus of the Landmark Preservation Commission. But I think some parishes think that when the landmark is only eligible for billions of dollars of grants, but it's very rare, very limited. So I was, when I talked to the parish, I was thinking about landmarks. Let's do a feasibility study. Let's see how much it costs to fix up the building, how much are your operational expenses, how much is your maintenance, what are your plans for the future to expand your mission, to solidify your mission. And when we did multiple studies for almost a year, we came to the conclusion that by landmarking it, by preserving, by keeping the building, they were limited in their development, growth, and energy. That became, I can sense that in the number that was an additional about $10 million in years. And I think a lot of parishes, especially in the Bronx and Washington Heights, they don't have the best community environment, which is struggling to here, just to pay a little. And I want to see them to look at their property, like, let's look at the next 50 years. If landmark works, great, because we always see the parishes, we see where landmark great, but they are also better resources than our churches that are in the Bronx or, let's say, in Washington Heights.
Thank you, Edward. So I think the takeaway there, I guess where we're gonna move from destination, is that it's not something that should be taken lightly by the owners, or I would also say that the community, because it's not a building, it's not about the parish. And so you really need to, the community and the parish understand the implications of destination, which is what we're doing. So Father Patrick Williams, as the priest in charge, congregation that has two landmark properties, one a designated landmark itself, and one a historic district. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and maybe about some congregations?
I think probably I'll be the most example stated here. There are two different church buildings. There's St. Luke's, which is in the Hamilton Heights area of Harlem, and then there's St. Martin's, which is in Central Harlem. St. Martin's is an individual landmark, and St. Luke's is a contributor to the historic district. These two congregations have actually been together since 19. So it's not new together, but they are distinct in terms of how they both of the congregations, or both of these buildings have deteriorated greatly over the last several years. It's not something that happened overnight, but it has happened. So at this point, neither are really happening because of all the so the decision was made to sell St. Luke's Church and then to use those resources in order to plow into St. Martin's Church. And I guess talk a little bit more about some of those challenges specific to St. Luke's in a moment. But as I think about whether or not it's been plus or minus or both, some of both, I think it's been both a gift and challenge in terms of the landmark designation. It's been a gift in terms of being able to secure a grant from Landmarks Conservancy about a year ago. Time will tell, but we're also seeing in a pretty good position to secure a grant from the National Trust. And I would also say that
Yes, I can also attest to the fact that early on in this project, I've only been here a couple of years, with the congregation, so I'm still pretty new myself. But I will say that early on, we were able to have a conversation with Mark and his team, just to talk a little bit about what was going on, St. Luke's Church, et cetera, and they were very much amenable to that conversation. The challenge, so with St. Martin's, staying with St. Martin's, the challenge has been, very recently, the diocese, the Bishop Diocese of New York has fronted the monies for us to be able to do work on our bell tower at St. Martin's Church. That work has been done. And so as that work got completed, it was time for the sign off for the work. Now, part of our designation has to do with these Caroline bells that we have. One of only two in the city. Riverside has the other Caroline bells in the city. So they were, of course, asking about, well, what about the bells? The bells have not returned. Well, St. Luke's is not sold. We do not have those proceeds. We have not been able to do work on those bells and to transport them back, to put them back in. So Landmarks, of course, said, okay, well, we'll go ahead and sign off on the bell tower work. However, we need a good faith effort from you guys, which is translated in the form of an escrow. So a pledge to put some money in escrow when St. Luke's is actually sold. So that's $100,000, but it's a good amount. So we've got to, whenever that sells, we've got to put some money in the escrow account. And that will be held there until such time as the bells come back. I don't know exactly when that's going to be. So while we're thankful that that was signed off on, and it's good for us, it's still a challenge. That's money that's going to be held up until such time as the bells actually return. So I would say that, yeah, it has been both a gift and a challenge in that sense. And certainly the landmark designation is totally separate from our life and struggle as a congregation. So we're happy for it, we recognize both sides. Thank you, Father Patrick, and I'll just underline the point that one thing that I want to say, unfortunate is that there were two buildings, notwithstanding the landmark, and you can leverage one to really support the other while sort of maintaining parish, but it's not that challenge. We're going to get to the development potential in the next section, but before we get there, I really want to make sure that we understand the maintenance demands of the landmark properties and supports that are available. When we get to the development portion of those questions on. So, Reverend Angela, I know that you have been you've led congregations, or several congregations, and now in a role supporting congregations. Can you give us a little sense of your experience with that?
Sure, Jason. I recently found myself saying a lot that God wrote a story that I didn't know about. And for this particular segment of or chapter, landmarks, it came when I was serving as a student in seminary and was supervising ministry in a church in Brooklyn. Classic story. Too much church, not enough people, and certainly not enough money. And as the church was beginning the process of trying to figure out how the faithful few, 70 to 80 people would show up on a Sunday morning, and in the winter time, we kept our coats on, and we might have even seen our breath during service. But they were faithful every Sunday. And when they could, they came out with different things that we tried to do during the week, but it got to a point there wasn't enough heat to do anything. And so we went down the road of talking with developers and what could be done. And lo and behold, we found out the church was in a historic district. And every developer we would talk to after that, at some point, would shake their heads and then move on. That was approximately 8 years ago. At the time, the church had a scaffolding on the front building that they eventually purchased because it was more cost effective than continuing to rent. That church now is currently surrounded by a scaffolding sidewalk shed. Because they have not been able to move forward with any type of development deal because of this location. I was so glad you ever said, oh, landmarks is not looking at. But they sure feel like they are hidden. Because, as I said to Mark in our Zoom prep with this, I said, Mark, we need to talk about how churches can have conversations with landmarks. Not only am I been blessed to be a pastor, I'm also an attorney. And I have to confess, I never thought that I could call up landmarks and have a conversation with anyone. And so I think today the importance of this panel is to hear from Mark and even Edward, this is a former place of employment, that landmarks is available for a conversation. But I think beyond the conversation, we need to know how to expedite the process. We need to understand that while we have the faith the size of a mustard seed, that is not falling on rocky soil, but that there is some good ground in which we can plant it for it to grow by having a fruitful and productive conversation with landmarks. Because while the building on the outside might look good, it can become dangerous if bricks are falling off. And you know, that beautiful terracotta that was created, we can't afford to exactly do that anymore. And because we now have scaffolding around our building, even if we continue to worship in that space, everybody thinks we're closed for business. Or we may not even feel as if we can invite them into our homes to worship. So I would invite landmarks to come into our homes and see the condition and understand that we're not trying to buck up against the system, but we're trying to continue to serve the people of God in conditions that have become inhabitable. And how will landmarks partner with us in the work that we are seeking to do? And so I'm glad to be part of this conversation as I now get to consult with many churches that will be facing this situation or actually are facing this situation. And we get to partner and support and give matching grants for the United Methodist Churches to be able to perhaps do what Father Patrick said and be able to at least start the assessment process. Because we have $20,000 just for the assessment part of it. And then told, well, then you also got to get landmarks to approve. So now I got to find more money to get an attorney to help. And it goes on.
So, thank you, Reverend Angela. We're running about 10 minutes behind, so hopefully you'll bear with me and we're gonna take our 10 minutes for this panel. The second is, I don't think when anybody designates landmarks, they are expecting or hoping that that landmark will be hidden behind scaffolding. So we all better deal with it. And before we start to talk about development, I've got a series of questions here. If you do have questions, I don't think we're gonna answer them singularly, but rather the general question of them. Please include your email, if we don't answer them, I'd like to be able to answer them. But before we move on to development and the intersections between potential affordable housing development and landmark properties, I want to talk about just general support other than development, just for a moment. So one quick question for Mark, and then I want to hear from Rachel. Mark, Landmarks Recreation Commission can provide technical sort of assistance, for lack of a better term, how communication. Might be an opportunity to introduce your staff member if you like, but they themselves do not have money to support landmark properties. Is that correct?
There's a small federal funded grant program that we got grants $30,000. Religious organization have people that are small. can also, we have for many, many years, decades, really had a person who handled properties at the Landmarks Commission. Egbert was in that position, he finished with the Landmarks Commission, James Zello, stand up, James. He is the person that we have now, that's what he does. And, follow up what, Angela said, you know, we ask, please reach out to us and have a conversation. There is no cost, there's no barrier, just come on in and talk to James, talk to the staff about what your challenges are and what the issues are, and we can help you problem solve. And I'm not saying every problem can be resolved, but I think a lot of problems can be resolved, and a lot of misconceptions can be, sort of put to the side by having these conversations.
Thank you, Mark. So Rachel, you represent an organization that works with organizations that have, I guess, purpose-built religious properties. Can you tell us what sort of support you all provide, and I guess in short, whether there's any best practices that we work with?
So I am the director of the National Fund for Sacred Places, which is a grant program that works nationally, and that's done in collaboration with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We give capital grants to congregations in big old buildings for capital purposes. So roofs, masonry, foundations, accessibility grants, elevators, that kind of thing. I specify that we work with purpose-built buildings. So we deal with buildings that were built as churches, as synagogues, as temples, etc. originally. But whether a building is landmarked or not does not matter to us. It is considered absolutely, if the building is on the National Register for Historic Places, that tells me that there is essentially certification that states that the building has national significance. That's one of our criteria. If a building is locally landmarked, that tells me that that building is probably going to be standing 20, 50 years from now, with the right kind of maintenance, protected. That certainly as a funder increases my confidence in the investment I'm making in the property. In addition to the National Fund and Partners for Sacred Places, we offer an array of programs and fee-for-service offerings to congregations. So we're this kind of interesting hybrid thing. We're a 30-year-old nonprofit focused on congregations and also a funder.
That's great, thank you. And so you should find your landmark property, you should find her afterwards, and certainly her information is on, and I guess it doesn't have to be there.
Yes.
Thank you. Her information is. So to follow up on the question that was asked and some that I received, so really about now the intersection of development, specifically affordable housing development and landmark properties, whether that property is in, and I guess it could also be a change to the existing building, but it also could be brand new structure. This is for you, Mark. Can you tell us a little bit about whether and how development can occur on landmark property or in a historic district, and what considerations are brought into play when landmarks determines that, or other parties or other parties that weigh in that solution?
Sure, so I think what's really important to understand about the landmark law is that landmarks law does not freeze properties in their current state. It is a process and a law that tells the commission, you must make sure that changes that happen are appropriate changes. So change is built into the landmarks law, and it's built into how we regulate. So we have an extensive body of rules. Approximately 95% of all applications are approved through rules. Those rules allow for rooftop and rear yard additions, side yard additions. They allow for all sorts of changes to the things that are larger than that go to the full commission. But again, the point is not that these can't change. The question is how to make those changes appropriate to the building in terms of not only the architecture, but the perhaps. And so that is why conversation is really important. If you don't address the person's
question over there, if you're thinking about how to develop and add to your building, you need a committee that understands the zoning hours, but you also need to understand what is it about the building that makes it significant? What are the features that are key? Is there a place to put the addition somewhere else? You were thinking maybe it should go here, working with James and the staff, you may realize you can put it somewhere else, and maybe you need to be bigger than you thought. You don't know. You need to understand the site, and talk to the commission, and understand sort of what the criteria are and significance. And I would say that conversation can happen early. You don't have to design something. Don't come in and spend all this money on design. Come in early and say, listen, we want to do this. Here's the zoning. How can we accomplish this? What do you think? And staff will give you their opinion. Now, it's just our opinion. Ultimately, the commissioners will decide what's appropriate. We can give you some guidance. And so I think that's important. Now, obviously, the goal here is to demolish. That's a different story, and obviously a more complicated. But I'm just saying, closing before all that, just last year, we did a very large affordable housing development on a portion of the individually designated church. So it's something that happens, and something that can happen, and I think we should have a conversation. I think I know that, George. So you, sir, should probably follow up with James as the next step. I'd like to get Edward's thoughts, and then I can closing remarks, and then I think perhaps make us hook. So I guess Edward, and then if we can squeeze it in, others that close it up. But Edward, regarding new development or changes, having sat on the whole side of the local.
Yeah, I think part, I know, I think many and what now can provide is the each reporting I work for me is on my it's out of the review of the student provider funding and spend America but I think this is very important. People funding is very intricate and one technology and provide model. So having to recurring building really nice. Great. One thing valuable development I know that I've done many of these applications and the other side is land provision to allow for residents looking for food inside for food. The only problem that I see is because we need to be more conversation with the church directly. If we have a development, especially public arts, by the developer, and we need to give them money to the church, so we have to get it dollars. That's sustainable economic model that we're looking for. And the last part is we do a one-time repair to satisfy. It's very delicate balance that it's very hard to somebody ask for much more. And we got the same thereby not creating also actually sure for that. They have that money to try to make it down, but I think the same problem is getting we had the last, I guess we had the last part of the
So before I wrap up, I want to thank our panelists. So certainly did not give them enough time. But does anybody have 10 or 20 second closing thought or final call before I wrap up?
Yes, I want to say the word flexibility. Day in and day out, what I do is work with congregations and major capital projects and campaigns. They're working to deal with both the architectural planning side of things and fundraise at the same time. It's complicated stuff. Yesterday, I checked in with one of my congregations. They're in Washington DC, right across the street from the White House. They're in the process of restoring the 200-year-old metal tower, and it's a wood tower. Their plan is to replace the deteriorated wood shingle from the exterior with an alternative material. Because they have to put a scaffolding every 10 years to do this, based on the life of the wood. Wood shingle lasts about 10 years. Once they have this plan, they approach the two entities that they need to kind of review their project in DC. One is COVID, one is not, right? That kind of leads to, I think they need to be flexible, to be understanding, while also keeping in mind the standards that inform the decision. That's all.
Thank you, Rachel. So, in closing, again, in terms of next steps, and hopefully you have a lot of resources here. The mayor's office and staff are reviewing our recommendations. If you want to be involved and have additional questions, there's a blue card with an email address if you follow up with us. What I want to conclude with is what in addition to thanking our panelists, is what you've heard here and really what came out of the recommendations. Is that there's one, landmarking can't exist in the silo, right? It's focused on public benefit. I read you the purpose of the law where we started, but the public benefit has got to be larger than the building. So we have to have an analysis, including affordable housing, whether or not it's a benefit or burden, or how it can be a greater benefit, how we can have both. The mayor charged us not to invent faster horses, right? So we got to think bigger. So our recommendations here are to evaluate what the public benefit is of landmarking, how it can be improved or meet other public benefits, and then to figure out this doggone money issue, right? Because as we said, landmarks is designated and they can provide technical assistance, and we thank them for it. But there's got to be dollars that support this, because we don't want a whole city of landmark staff. If we're going to have landmark buildings, we want to see them, and we want public benefit and affordable housing inside. So that's what we're asking for. I hope that you'll join us. Thank you for his time. Thank you.
Anyone just wait, you want to say anyone?
Respect.
I move, I get hurt. Very, very important. If you did not come into this room this morning, Jewish or Muslim, we did not knight you as a Jew or Muslim, so don't go to this table over here. This is halal, unfortunately. So if you didn't come to Jewish or Muslim, you're not a Jew right now. Okay, let's move on. Everyone else, there is vegan, there is vegetarian option to my far right. Again, we don't need to have a line, we don't need to form a queue. If you don't get before the next 15 minutes, I guarantee you, I will personally pay for your lunch. Under $3 if you don't get anything to eat. So, I'm gonna have the next time to come forward. Again, kosher halal is in the direct back. Don't touch it, don't look at it, if you're not.
I'm gonna see what it is.
It's like, don't fall confused, so if someone is in the line, you have to put people, don't stand in the line, you sit down until the person has gone out there and come sit down. Not much option. It's very simple, you take your meal and you get back and you sit down, right? So this is the last thing, right? You get the small volume of this time. All right, that's what we're gonna do. That's what we're gonna do. So this is the last panel, and at the end, we're gonna take some questions. For those of you asking questions, if you stayed, those of you who stayed, we wanna thank you so much for staying and being with us. This is boot camp. We are committed as a city to listen to the community
and to be able to respond appropriately to where we can respond. So we're very again committed to the faith community to, again, register a place where we can use your affordable housing opportunities to meet our bigger goal in our blueprint. All right, so again, you can eat, but you don't have to talk. And so we want to ask for next time ready. The one is here. Where's that? Reverend Backus. All right, thank you all so much. After you grab your food, you can see it. That'll be very helpful for us. We want to thank you again for coming out to this day. Thank you for your time being with us.
Okay. Thank you. Take a breath. Stretch, I'm almost there. I'm Sarah. I'm an associate partner in MDP Architects. I'm an architect at South County. In our practice, we support mission-driven institutions through strategic planning, through design, and through historic preservation, including the restoration of St. Patrick's Cathedral, the restoration of this charming parish you can see across the street, and plenty of others. So, in this conversation, we're going to talk about areas. This is complicated, it's contentious, and it's incredibly impactful. Fortunately, we have an exceptionally capable panel of experts. The man needs your help, right? But if the city is dry, it requires writing the community. You need the mayor's help too. We've heard lots of the working group, their ideas as it pertains to land market, as it pertains to support for affordable housing development. We heard about the impact they have on the communities. We're going to talk about airlines. And part of the reason this conversation is important is that you, the faith community, has value to this city beyond the square footage that we control. And the purpose of the working group is to find every opportunity to strengthen the faith community through their real estate assets. That's where airlines come in. This is equally tied to the development of affordable housing, but just like when you talked about upstream and downstream solutions, if you are going to provide those solutions, you need to be sound. You need to thrive. And the rules around air rights policy is a way to strengthen this. So please join me in welcoming the panel. This one, John Manager, is the head of the housing division at the Department of the City Planning. We're very grateful for this today. He teaches land use law at the New York University Graduate School of Service. John also served in the council division of the Department of City Planning and this council, despite the impact of being most comprehensive zoning plans for 30 years through DCD's inclusionary housing. He has also legal documents, and he served as the public face department doing outreach across the city. Jessica Moser is an attorney with Goldstein Hall, a certified G Corp law firm with a focus on affordable housing and development. Jessica helps houses worship outside of the state research with their congregation. Building on her experience in politics, Jessica represents faith-based clients in various real estate scenarios that are negotiations for development, for discretionary conditions, the city. Brian Cook is a principal at Capitolino with over 18 years experience in affordable housing financing, New York City zoning law, and economic development, inducements, and policies. Previously, he worked as the assistant comptroller for economic development at the New York City Comptroller's office. He was a former director of land use planning and development in the Manhattan office. Reverend Reginald Lee Baucus is the third generation Baptist preacher in the neighborhood of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, which informs his work across real estate construction, digital real estate and technology, social, political, legal, and business activism. Reverend Bob was earned an electrical engineering degree from Fairview A&M at the University of Texas. He then did the Divinity School and the Juris Doctorate from Boston University School of Law. Bob is the founder of the Foundation. Tyler Mayhew, to our left, serves as the program director for the Mission Real Estate Development Initiative. He manages independent real estate advisors for impact investing and our mission partners in New York City and around the world. He has a background in urban planning and has led public-private real estate and urban planning initiatives in New York City Economic Development Corporation, New York City Business Services, and the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. There's a lot of resources. So let's start with you. John, when we talk about airlines, what are we talking
Good question, Taylor. It's really good to see everybody here. I see some familiar faces from Gil Brewer's faith-based initiative from last time. So happy to be back. Talk about it again. So what are we talking about when we talk about air rights? Or as we call it in Department of City Planning, development rights. So every building in New York City exists on a zoning law. And every zoning law generates development rights depending on what district it is. If you're in a low density district, you may have the number of development rights may equal the size of your zoning law. If you were in a high density zoning district like we are here at Trinity Church, then your zoning law may generate 10 times the development rights of the size of your zoning. Now, the fundamental rule of the way zoning works in New York City, that development rights stay on the zoning law. Whatever that zoning law generates, you can use it on that zoning law. Period. Sometimes there are buildings on zoning laws that are below what the zoning would allow. Sometimes there are buildings on zoning laws that would allow above. Zoning laws get redeveloped, etc. But the fundamental rule is zoning development rights stay on the zoning law. In a very few limited exceptions, the city has created programs in the zoning that enable development rights to travel from one zoning to another. Sometimes a little bit of distance as well. And some of those exceptions are, for instance, for landmarks. Following on the last panel. When landmarks restrict what a landmark owner can and can't do on that zoning law, and would inhibit the ability to redevelop that site and use all the development rights on the zoning law. And the city, back in the 60s, to prevent legal challenges, created a system that would enable landmarks to transfer development rights to adjacent zoning laws, either contiguous or directly across the street. There's other instances where public open space requirements on privately owned zoning lots prevent the redevelopment and use of development rights on that zoning lot. So we created other programs that enable those owners to transfer development rights to other zoning lots. In that instance, it's kind of like a replacement for paying for the publicly accessible open space on a private site. Typically, you have to go to eminent domain and wheel and deal with property owner, pay a price for that. Instead, in those instances, we create a transferable development rights program that enables development rights to go to a limited subset of other zoning laws. One more example, and then I'll stop, is the theater subdistrict, where we as a city have decided that it's super important to maintain lower density theater uses in the theater subdistrict to maintain the theater sector, which is very important to New York City's economy. And then compensation to those owners with the low density theaters are prohibited from redeveloping the property, created a transfer district where they could take the development rights generated on that zoning lot and send them within a district within the surrounding areas. So that's basically how TDRs, transferable development rights, work and the limited exceptions for
So, can you, let's say, Brian, could you talk for a minute about why this is particular in terms of policy, in terms of possibilities
to properties owned by houses.
Sure, so houses of faith, can you hear me? Raise your hand. Houses of faith particularly are often purpose-built, low-scale structures, often built without a lot of floors built to surface. Almost in every case, or in many cases, are being built below the existing density. Regularly, I hear it when I was in government and, I have these development rights. I would like to go out. I would like to help support the mission of the church, which would be food pantry or something. How do I? Often, while the city has rules where you can create development, you're actually can be fairly limited. You need to get agreements from your neighbor. You need to have a neighbor who's willing to build. And so I think part of the restriction that we have seen with faith-based community faith is this inability to use a resource that potentially could be steered towards the and I'd say that faith-based organizations are, in my mind, somewhat unique compared to other structures to consider. Because the law itself has always acknowledged that houses of worship aren't merely edifices for worship. They are charity as a fundamental function of the church. They become part of the social safety net. And, I could give examples of the black food kitchen in my neighborhood, who whenever I go to church in my neighborhood, they run their food bank, it looks like the United Nations out there. It is not just the church that's being supported, it's the community. But we can also look towards this recent pandemic. The Brookings Institute in March issued a report that found that in areas where black churches were closing in New York City, there were worse health outcomes than there were in neighborhoods where they were open. Because they are fundamental to the way government communicates, the way we gather, the way we participate in sort of in a terrible way. And to that end, I think we get to this question of can air rights, can development rights be used for something that supports a social mission that is inherent?
So let's talk for a second about that. So, Marcus, could you just say a few words about what more flexible rules about the transfer of air rights would mean for houses of faith? I think first and foremost, more flexible rules would demonstrate a commitment to equity and opportunity for New York City. By and large, we have a lot of houses of worship that are asset rich and cash poor. Therefore, we are expected to run a race with our hands tied behind our back and 1 foot behind our back at the same time. We're expected to run at the same speed and rate as everyone else. So when we talk about that, our social impact in the community, my church, we do community service in terms of our meal pension. It's $10 per meal. I'm in Brownsville, Brooklyn, with seniors on fixed income. And it's 3 times more expensive to buy a gallon of milk today than it was just a few months ago. We're dealing with these realities of social needs, so how do we create access to the resources that these mission-minded houses of worship can use? And air rights creates a unique opportunity, we think, to be able to do it. So we're asset rich cash poor, we're under attack. When you look at the predatory practices of some, and I say this because it needs to be said, but I say it cautiously. I don't want to be called anti-Semitic. I don't want to be called anything else. But in some of our communities, in Black communities, there are others who are coming and pushing us out. I have a building next to my church where someone who's not from our community tried to attack. They didn't know I have a law. They didn't know I have resources, the Department of Buildings and other things. So we were able to save our property. It cost me $150,000 to do it, but my church only has a $470,000 budget. On top of $10 per meal, trying to feed a community. This crisis intervention. The reason violence is not what it could be is because churches are getting out of the corners. We're doing crisis intervention at the family level, at the relational level, at the school level. So there's so many services. But the question is, how are the resources that we do is churches have property. Churches have air rights. Not being used, unproductive, they're not taxed. So we have to begin to address that and deal with the real question comes back to racial. Because a lot of these churches that we're talking about in the same communities, the people are concerned in the newspapers about the violence and the uptick. Most of the people talking, they never walked in Brownsville. They never walked in the Bronx at night. So don't tell me what you care about if you're not on the ground actually doing work. Is the beneficiary of this nation where we're standing and sitting above auction blocks that held black bodies. We're looking at air rights and buildings that are above the burial grounds of our ancestors, and yet we cannot participate. If my church was on 71st and 5th Avenue, I could get $71 million for my air rights, but I can't get nothing to do the work in the community. So this is extremely important for our community. Thank you. So they, talk a little bit about the broader, talk about what air rights does to a community when they're made available to the society.
I do want to stress a few points that our speakers before this panel made, and some of my fellow panelists have made as well. You know, we've acknowledged the housing and affordability crisis in our state and the role that faith-based organizations have in preventing homelessness, providing services, and building affordable housing. We've acknowledged the mental health crisis that we see in our city and the role that faith-based organizations have in providing these critical services in the community, particularly in Black, Latinx, immigrant communities. And we just started to acknowledge some of us, but the fact that you faith leaders know very well that we also have a crisis of the churches closing, right? And there are many reasons why that is, and a critical one is that of our real estate market conditions, high cost in New York City, the high cost for repair and maintaining buildings, some of that due to land market, but also because of other high cost of living that we have in our current economic situation. And to add to that, the predatory real estate market, right? So we're talking about mission-driven organizations and faith leaders who are inherently at the unfair playing field with experts in real estate, who are able to play in this marketplace of developments, whereas our faith leaders do not have access to that. Now, so like you talked about this panel as principle of this panel and the discussion as providing resources so that our faith-based organizations can be sound and thrive. And how do we unlock value, unlock capital to do that? I think this panel is unique because, you know, it's looking at increasing liquidity and the ease of realizing assets of the real estate and these development rates is something that our faith-based organizations currently have. So how do we make that easier? How do we look to examples? And I challenge my colleagues in the city of looking at existing New York City precedents where we can transfer development rights in a larger geography to help ease these racial equity burdens for areas that do not see as much development as Northern Manhattan or the west side of the town. And how do we also look at national and international markets where there is exchange credit, whether that's carbon credit, whether that's the mineral rights credits, and other examples where, again, we can provide additional capital and funding beyond philanthropy and beyond just development. That provides time for faith-based organizations to possibly consider development. But that also provides a source of capital to repair your buildings, to invest in your buildings from a capital maintenance perspective. That provides the security and stability to
complete your ministry and expand your programs. And that really allows our faith-based organizations and our surrounding communities to thrive. Right, so I think, you know, my colleagues in Calais here have very innovative and new ideas of how we can use our existing New York City land use framework to do that. With the goal again of widening the transfer area and creating another option for our faith-based institutions to realize this value.
So you've heard a lot about the working group, so the mayor can lead the working group to look at how we can support faith-based properties, faith-based organizations, different properties. These folks were in that working group, it was divided into 3 committees. One that looked at affordable housing development support, one that looked at landmarking, and one that looked at airline. So the action plan, that was the result of that effort, has proposals in it for changes to the zoning resolution, changes to the way that airlines can be along, and they are ambitious. And so at the beginning of these conversations and policies are both long running and somewhat fraught, but the city has successfully made significant changes to zoning. So that's just as John was trying, new and interesting ways to move air rights around. So, George, I would love to hear from you, from the department perspective, how that process plays out. What are the forces that motivated those changes in the past? And I suppose what we ought to anticipate in terms of a conversation about some of these ambitious goals.
Thanks, Taylor. That's a great question. A good way to answer this is through the long enterprise history of a landmark TDR, transferable development rights program, because it illustrates some of the challenges and opportunities of these programs. So back when the landmark law was created in '65, there were all these concerns that it would represent, an illegal burden on property owners who, all of a sudden had the ability to do whatever they want with their property limited. And so in response to a challenge around Grand Central Terminal, the city created this transferable development rights program that enabled landmarks like Grand Central theoretically to take their unused development rights and sell them for money to some other property owners in the area. Now, that sounds all well and good. In practice, however, what happened is that the program was just kind of created at the last minute, as a way to have something to argue in front of the judge. In this case, went all the way to the Supreme Court. Didn't really result in that many transfers. It wasn't that easy to use. It takes a ton of process. Like today, if you want to use the basic landmark transfer program, you have to go all the way through Europe. Now that's like a couple years. You're gonna have to pay, 6 figures probably to some consultants. And the transfer area is also really tight. It has to be a property that's contiguous, or basically contiguous, but for a street, so directly across the street. So there aren't that many receiving sites that you can, knock on the door and say, hey, you want some development rights? So in practice, there's only been like 10 or 12 landmark TDR transfers since the 1960s when this was created. And it only happens in really, really high value areas like, financial district or like Midtown. Over time, this presented a real problem for landmarks in certain areas. And so the department engaged in broader, more careful planning exercises in certain areas. Like let's take Greater East Midtown, for example. The landmark TDR program was basically created for Grand Central. But for years and years and decades, they weren't actually able to sell those development rights to any properties because the program was too restricted. When I started city planning 8 years ago or whatever, Grand Central still had to transfer any development rights. And so the agency engaged in the creation of planning exercise that created a district and then baked into the zoning receiving sites as well. Sites that if they wanted to achieve their maximum size, a maximum size building on that site,
they actually had to go to Grand Central, or they had to go to Central Synagogue, or they had to go to St. Bart's, or they had to go to St. Patrick's to get those landmark development rights to achieve their full size. And so that was a years-long planning exercise just to create a transfer district that at long last finally enabled some of those landmarks in Greater East Midtown to sell those development rights and get revenue for many churches or synagogues in that area for revenue. So that's the type of process we're talking about. We did a conference back in 2015 on TDRs, and Carl Weisbrod, who was the chair at the time, said, it's really easy to send TDRs up into the sky. What's hard is to land them. And so I would say the most important aspect of that is creating a framework that enables you to land the TDRs, that creates receiving sites. And that's a years-long planning process, and then you basically go through EULA, land dispute procedure to create those changes to the zone.
So, so I guess part of what that points to is that there is a trade-off between churches, houses of worship, capitalizing on those unused air rights and the bulk impact that it has on the city. That if the idea is that you take air rights here and you put them somewhere far away that doesn't have the schools, the physical infrastructure, the subway service to support more people with density in that location, that's what the EULA process is supposed to figure out. However, the examples that John pointed to, around theater district, the work in Town East, on South Street Seaport, when the city decides something is worth saving, that shows up. It shows up in the zoning resolution, shows up in special districts. Which shows up as significant changes to the rules. That is a major process, but it happens. It happens. So let's talk about. We're going to get into this, but let's talk about some of the proposals that are in the action plan. Brian, maybe you could just walk us through this one by one. First one is as of right transfers.
So when asked about how do we start thinking about this product, we decided to look into the zoning resolution for how do we find a larger catchment area where the Grand East, the church, given the social good, can find more receiving sites. And so what we realized was that there's probably one as of right area that allows you to connect Grand East inside. It's inclusionary housing. And it creates the largest sort of transfer area between density and bonus to granting benefit out of anywhere. It's within a half mile of the site, the church, or within the community. And that's been upheld by the courts as being, able to be connected without creating any issues of, say, trying to transfer density from Manhattan to Staten Island, where someone could say, this is no longer about zoning, right? So from our first recommendation would be to expand the way that faith-based organizations and service-based nonprofits, expand their catchment area, allow as of right transfers where they can find places for density that otherwise violate no other zoning. So we could build more if they only had extra density, allow that to occur.
So then let's talk about what it does.
So then where they land, in most cases, if this were adopted, and I will point out, this is an innovative idea that has not been done. This is going completely rare. So it is a big push. Where they land would be sites in the community. So then you use that development right for development. That could be the church itself looking harder to build affordable housing, transmission. Or it could end up being, to get the revenue to sustain the services that. If, for example, however, we run into a point where churches can develop more, or the site can take more density, but they can't because we're getting a height limit, we need a greater process. And that process we think should be modeled after the process that was done at done recently went to, sorry, the city council, where we allowed the BSA to grant a special permit to waive height, setback, and other bulk regulations to allow for greater density where it works with the neighbor character of the community. This was, very similar to something we recently adopted with Lodge, for example. That was where it jumped out of my head.
So, okay. So Jessica, could I ask you to talk about, we know that the sale of air rights will help the institutions that sell them. We know that, there's going to be concern about where they land, but that particularly insofar as where they land supports, neighborhoods as they are, is that all can be managed through necessary policies. Talk about, and again, we've heard a lot about the community impact of the institutions themselves, but I think this idea of transferring our community bulk around has the potential to benefit the public beyond just the institutions that sell them, for example, through the production of affordable housing and transfer of rights. For example, through a tax or fee on the sale of rights that the city takes. And I know we talked a little bit about the value that exists, that is locked in unusable air rights, that is not only value to the institution, but also taxable value to the city. So I'd just like to look a little broader beyond the big organizations that obviously don't have these policies and talk about the other upsides for the city of Republic.
I just wanted to add to the conversation about air rights transfers. We hear a lot of technical words, but air rights transfers and zoning lot mergers. And we probably all know the faith-based institution that is able to sell their air rights to a development because they were probably have development happening right next to it. And this conversation, the goal of this conversation is to make that opportunity more equitable. That there should be a way to reinvest that value into the organization, into the work that the organization is doing, without being lucky enough to just have development happening right next to it. And so what Taylor just touched upon is that, traditionally when we think of these transactions, there is the generating site that has the air rights development, and there's the receiving site. And in both air rights transactions, those are the only two beneficiaries. Technically, we all know, we've heard in the last couple of hours about what I call it the care bear light that comes out of faith-based organizations. If you are parents of somebody of a certain age, you understand the analogy that the good work that comes out of faith-based organizations really does spread throughout the community. Whether it's during the pandemic or during an environmental crisis or a distribution site for homeless services, that is a value that we know that faith-based organizations provide to the community. But in these transactions, there's a way to raise additional funds so that resources in the communities that are not directly connected to the faith-based organization can be reinvested in the community, whether it is through transportation or parks or libraries or other resources that that we all use, whether we are a member of the organization or someone who's living in that development. And so whether it is a tax on the transaction or it is a pot that's created for these resources, that those funds can then be turned into the goals of the community. Each community board has its set of goals and its priorities for the year, and it's very specific and very local. Whether they need a new library or a new playground or all the services that these houses of worship are already doing can be married to larger community goals in a way that pushes the work that we're all trying to do forward in an easier, more streamlined way, as opposed to just it feels harder. And it shouldn't have to be that hard. We have tools to create momentum for this greater goal.
Thank you. And I know, John, that apart from the swings in the action plan, there are things that the Department of City Planning is looking at, interested in studying, doing other policy changes that would support faith-based organizations. So I'll talk about those.
Reverend Bacchus is is completely right, that more flexibility is the name of the game. And so we, across a range of domains, but including for faith-based organizations, are looking at the ways that zoning regulations get in the way of faith-based organizations using their properties to further their mission. And so some of the examples are, many churches have underutilized adjunct buildings, whether it's former schools or parsonages or convents or, banquet hall space or whatever, that today in most of the neighborhoods across the city are really hard to convert to the same residential uses, which is the use that's most in demand and most remunerative in many places. So we're looking at liberalizing the conversion regs citywide, so it's not just, central commercial districts that can use those flexible rules in order to convert and generate revenue. We're also looking at many churches are on campuses, where there's space, but the zoning regulations today make it really hard to add infill development on church campuses. And so we are looking at those regulations as well and work with churches across the city to try to facilitate development of, sometimes it's affordable housing, or sometimes it's new church buildings, or whatever on those sites to make sure that faith-based organizations can use their campuses. We've also seen in many parts of the city redevelopment of churches as well, with new church plus, maybe it's affordable or supportive on top. And when we say church or synagogue or temple or whatever, we think of grand buildings. That's not always the case. Like, you can have a church in a very humble building as well. And we see many sites around the city take advantage of that by creating a new church on, say, the cellar on the ground floor with supportive housing or affordable or just regular housing on top, trying to facilitate that. Parking reductions. Many churches have parking lots. Sometimes those are totally necessary to serve the congregation and they can be far flung around the city. Other times they're underutilized and can be used for, development that furthers the church's mission. Or if we reduce the parking requirement, it represents properties that can be sold to others for development, generating revenue. Also, we really do need to consider liberalizing landmark TDRs. I told you how the whole program that dates back to the 60s. We've only seen a dozen or so transfers over the last 50, 60 years. We need to reduce the amount of process that landmark churches have to go through in order to deal those development rights to adjacent property owners. That's really important. We can also look to other states. States like California introduced bills that for religious and other community types of organizations facilitate particular ways to facilitate development or redevelopment of those sites. California has a couple bills like that, so we're looking to things that are happening in other states as well. But there's a long line of things that might not be a moonshot of like a citywide new TDR mechanism, but they can be really meaningful, when added up together to a wide range of religious faith-based organizations around the city.
Thank you, John. And so I'd like to close this thing just a couple of things. So everyone up here, please, first one.
I don't know if I'll get this chance again, so I gotta take advantage of this moment. Amen. So, for real, right? Just seriously, this is a real matter. I mean, familiar with what's happening in Chicago right now. Chicago, the violence that's happening in the hood is now coming to downtown. And we're seeing that there's a rising tide of crisis that's about to spill over through our streets, and that's become a big, long, and creative ideas. That New York is what it is because of the creative imagination we have. We are a city that has maximized our verticality. And here it is, we have the competency, we have the capacity, do we have the courage is the question. Do we have the courage to do something different? We have to pull back the layers of the racist superstructures that exist from Robert Moses, who set up this city with C8 commercial one districts to make sure that minority communities never participate in housing opportunities. We have to look at the reality that we still have enough additional air rights to create 100,000 units of housing. I went across this state. My background is a former CEO of App City Development Corporation. We turned that organization around.
We went across from Buffalo to Rochester. This is happening in churches and cities and hoods across the state and across this nation. And if New York is going to be a model city, let us use our creative abilities to create something that can work somewhere else. And finally, I say in closing, what if we took 1 million air rights, unused air rights, available air rights, created 100,000 units of housing for home ownership? Work out a partnership with NYCHA where we find our Rosa Parks candidates who have been faithfully paying their rent for the last 20. I have members in my church who've been in NYCHA for 40 or 50 years. Why do we not create housing opportunities that we can transition in? So now I have 100,000 housing opportunities for people who have been faithful to New York in hoods when other people have deserted and abandoned, and then others took interest with the property values. What are we gonna do for those people? Opportunities have a double bottom line of creating new housing opportunities for home ownership and rental opportunities, but don't forget about the hood. Because the hood is coming to see y'all across Brooklyn Bridge, past Borough Hall, right down here in Wall Street. If we don't do something to address this, we need an economic development opportunity that housing can provide that can jumpstart churches and what we need, and we can really see a difference. Thank you. I didn't want to miss this opportunity. So, everybody up here, I suspect a lot of you out there, has been talking about air rights for a long time. And when Bricks and Mortals was first conceived 7, 8 years ago, in Manhattan Business Office, air rights, landmarking, the support for affordable housing development is what we were talking about. So I served as vice chair of the board of Bricks and Mortals. But it doesn't mean we're going in circles. We have never had leadership like Mayor Adams. What you can do for this city and what this city can do to support you in doing it. So the working group has done its job. We've produced the action plan. This summit is an important milestone in that process. It's the beginning. It's the beginning. But what we look forward to now is earnest, optimistic, cooperative engagement with the city agencies that are responsible for implementing these changes. And the ideas that are in here are our best ideas. But as we did the work, we came in with our own ideas of what the solutions were. And as we worked through it with experts, with representatives of the community, the ideas got more nuanced, they got more interesting, they got more creative. And I look forward to working with the agencies to find even more interesting and more nuanced ideas, because while our goals remain optimistic, what we want is real change. We want policies that can get them. We want this to get done. And to do that, we need you. We need your ideas, we need your expertise, we need your voices. We want this to be the work of the entire community of New York City, because that's how it's going to get done. And we're incredibly grateful for the leadership that's been shown. We're incredibly grateful to have this forum to bring these ideas out. And we're most grateful for the partnership that's been put in place, driven by the mayor, for really pushing these policies forward, because the potential for it is tremendous. So let's go get it done. Thank you.
So, thank you all. Let's give them another round of applause. I believe that when I talk to my colleagues in different offices in government all over, I always tell them that New York City has the most vibrant, astute, faith leaders. And I want to thank you all for making New York a leader in the world when it comes to thinking just outside of the government is good. That's why government uses nonprofit organizations. That's why we pass a budget. We have to use nonprofit organizations because government will always do one thing, correct? But the faith leaders doing others, the faith others the heart. So we want to thank you for that for sure. And thank you all for staying. So we're not finished yet. We're finished, but we're finished. Now we have the opportunity to take a few questions. Do you have some cards? I can take those. If you have, I don't know, right, so the first question I have, for those churches who are renting, how do we get property built for housing space? I can take this one, if you're renting and you don't own the land itself, if you own, difficulty, I think that you should partner up and see if you have property, and once you have the property, that's it, the name of it, you're not part of the decision, that you can follow, the development part, am I correct? Yes, no, maybe so. I stopped it. That's what you need. Do we have any more cards? All right, do we have any questions right over here? Going once or twice?
Over here.
All right, affordable housing, can we be furnished with a detailed list of the steps from A to D? As to how to begin the process of converting our church real estate into a renovation and reconstruction project, or church building property into affordable residential housing unit without selling our air rights. All Lord.
Not just any lawyer. Right, you have this in one side, and so you trust, you go to the next one.
All right, go to the expert, all right. What's up, what are the streets to houses of maybe tracks, what are the tracks of houses of worship and other safe spaces, two resources, and what is the income range for affordable housing?
I mean, the range is.
Let me read it, then you take it.
It does range from, many of the state programs range from 60% AMI to 125, 130% AMI. Really depends on the subsidy structure and the program of each development. I also wanted to add for houses of worship or interested in redeveloping, particularly for affordable housing, then they panelists from other organizations who have access to resources, including legal representation, consultants to help you. My team at Trinity works with faith-based organizations to do just that, so I'm happy to speak to you afterwards, as does enterprise and community partners, among others.
Yeah, so there's if you put up my office information, we are in one stop. The mayor of the city understand, I served 8 years ago, all that had state advice, and we did these summits at Borough Hall. The project that we talked about, Ebenezer, Pastor Ebenezer Church served my first vice president for 12 years in a nonprofit position in Passport. And we single-handedly look at those projects, and there was no project that came to Borough Hall that was worthy of funding that the mayor said come to. And it was a pleasure for us to give capital money as the board president to this project today. So we committed, as a matter of fact, we met with a group of individuals from Ashton as well, talk about transfer here, right? So the mayor thought about what we need to get done. We'll meet together with what city is going to do. I also want to say that city government is really, when you look at it, it's to assist the people. Not to say, well, we have structures in place, because we make laws, that's our rule. There's a difference between a policy that can be changed by the will of the mayor, and there's law that needs to be changed. I'll tell you one thing. When you look at the whole idea of discretionary funding, I didn't realize how simple it was to receive discretionary funding. So I started to run and create one of our organizations in the city. Discretionary funding means exactly what the word says. I'm that person discretion. They can grant your organization provided that you fit the criteria and have all the work in place. Capital money or discretionary funding for operations. At that elected official discretion, they can fund you to what level they want to fund you as long as they live with the law. So city government is meant so that you can serve the people. Without government, the only thing that we do is to serve people. So all of the agencies are in place so that we can keep up the knowledge, that we can make sure that we have water electricity, make sure that laws are in place so that we can protect those that want to rule on us. That's the role of government. So to think about the system that's in place that we can change, there's nothing wrong with that. So we are going to be bold. What we can do, I can't promise everything that none of us can, but we wanted to manage and bring along with the faith leaders. From morning until now, the experts and the diverse group of individuals at this table, it shows us that again, that the city have a lot that we can learn from all. All right, landmark, small scale affordable housing development. It seemed like with a landmark district, contributing building. What I mean by it is the LPC working with HPD to remove barriers for affordable deals on working affordability. As a right footprint development in landmark areas. All right, we can answer that, right? All right, and anyone on the panel give tips on identifying properties and land for development? Yeah, just grab one in the room. But anybody wants to say something about that? Anyone? Call for you. Okay, questions. There's so many unused or unutilized spaces, back and smaller houses of worship with defined hospitals, space for walkable storage, or community service event space. We collect clothes, shoes, housewares for free distribution for communities need and waiting districts of the space. Did we set up, there was an app that you had set up to me, I thought was excellent. What was the name of that app again? Can't remember, but we're trying to.
Yeah, so, Person World, with Partners for Sacred Places, launched a website which is called Venuely.org, Venue, L-Y. And nonprofits and other houses of faith can rent space, share space from, houses of faith, exclusively from houses of faith. So it's really a mission-driven, site, and all for low market value. And if you have a property that you want to swap or a space that's more long-term, then you can do our property swap, email us also. So you can, if you want to have information, either of those things, you can shoot emails that same email address on the postcard.
So if the person is, if you want to use your space that you're not using as a revenue source by renting to other organizations that are on the mission, that's the place to do it. It's launch, it's new, we're working to build it up.
Yeah, so and also to use this as a resource, the Office of Faith and Partnerships, you know, we interface and help navigate the complexities of problem. That is our role. Always is committed just to the faith. We don't do anything else but interact with all faith communities. That is our mandate, and that is what again we are going to be doing in this administration. So my email for office is on the screen. Join us next week, Wednesday, for our monthly clergy meetings. It's going to be once a month. It's Wednesday, I don't see the time, but I think it's going to be 2 p.m. If you have any questions, the video is going to be uploaded to YouTube, and then we'll send it to all of our lists as well. If you didn't get anything from today, December 17th, the Interfaith Center of New York is going to have a faith community's call to action on housing, and that is December 15th at the Wooded Rabbi Marshall Myers Retreat. And it's going to be 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in Zoom, and then 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. in person. The information is outside the packet. We also have great information from HPD about our affordable housing project. We're going to be working with HPD to release a portal with some information for faith communities so that they can navigate into what you need to do, you know, to get the lead safe and secure affordable housing project. Again, we're committed to the faith communities. And as you see based on what we have said, we understand exactly your commitment to the city. We understand your commitment to the city as well. And so we want to thank you. Let's put our hands for all of our panelists. So much. So all the primary schools in there would like to connect with people, these, so